I think that's all. Boom. Okay. So we are in. Just to save as much time as possible, we got all that out of the way, and we're just diving right into the talk. Is that cool with you guys? Can we do that? Cool. And so, as I was kind of prepping, I've been prepping for this talk for like a month now. Because I've known we're talking about it. If you come into my office upstairs, my whiteboard has literally said like porn across the top. And I've like written like all the notes. And I kid you not, people have walked in my office and be like, hey Taylor, what? And like just look at my board and they're like, so, high school ministry is going well. And I'm like, thanks guys. But so I've been planning for this for a while. And it's also been really hard for me to know kind of how to come around this and how to talk about it. There's a lot of different ways I wanted to go. There's a lot of information I wanted to share. There's a lot of scripture I wanted to look at. There's a lot of conversations that I wanted to have. A lot of stories I wanted to share. But we'd be here for 3 hours. And I don't want to do that because that's a long time. And I think y'all's conversations in your small groups are actually way more fruitful than me standing up here and just talking to you for forever. So I want to give you guys as much time for that as possible. I'll kind of give the main point, the bulk of my talk away right at the beginning. There's a couple of things that I want you guys to take away from this and from our morning. And the first thing is, I want you to know that God created sex as a good thing, but that porn distorts God's intention and image of sex. Sex is good. As if you were here last week, Robert spent his whole time talking about how sex is good, how God created it for good, how he wants that for us. But pornography is not that. Pornography distorts our view of sex, distorts God's intention for sex. And then the other thing I want you guys to take away is that Jesus redeems what porn destroys. Jesus died on the cross for our sins, and he died so that he could redeem the things that make us broken. And that includes, it's not limited to, but includes pornography and the effects that has on us. So that's what I want y'all to take away. If you don't leave with, don't tune out now, but if you leave with nothing else, leave with those two things. That sex is good, but that porn distorts it. And that Jesus redeems what porn destroys. And to kick us off today in this, I kind of just want to get a feel for where you guys are, for where we are in the room when it comes to the issue of pornography. And I'm not going to ask you to stand up or raise a hand or whatever. But I created a kind of poll this week that I really would love y'all's info on right now. And so if you guys can pull out your phones, everybody take a phone out and go to this link that's at the top. It's in our Instagram bio, or you can just type it in on Safari. But I need everybody to get their phones out, do this, and this is just so that kind of we can see where we are in the room. You don't log in to anything, so there's no way to know who is saying what. So I want you guys to be totally honest, even if you're like, I disagree with every statement up there. It is on Instagram. It's on Go to Fellowship Students. It's on our
Dude, I left my phone at home.
I did turn it on.
Hey, look.
Boom. Come on.
I mean, I can already
Freak me out.
click my insert.
Is it here, like, clicks on that link?
I know, right? I made it very specific. So I'm hoping that nobody's going to be like, meet.ps/fellowship students PSD. It's not here, you know? So y'all take a second, click what you think, fill that out. It's one question for now. There will be more. There's 3.
Barack Obama. I don't even know.
And this was just to kind of see where y'all are at. I'm not looking for any answers. Like I said, if you end up disagreeing with everything up there, that's cool. I just want to get a
It
feel.
literally says it at the top. Vote now at meet.
Anybody having trouble logging in? All right, I think there's about 25 of us in here, so we'll see. Someone is switching. Someone's like, yes, yes, yes. Has anybody not been able to log in? You?
Just go on the Instagram. Just go on the Instagram and search
I try to make it as easy as possible.
I still can't. Somebody posted that.
They won't. Oh, on our bio? That would be funny.
There's gonna be like,
I changed it right before this, and I'm changing it right after. Don't you worry.
they're gonna be like,
I joked about that earlier. I was like, if somebody picked up my notes for this sermon, the word porn is in there like 60 times. Like, so I'm like, they'd be like, what is happening?
it's gonna think you're like a porn.
Well, I hope so. I hope that's what happened. Is Melanie luck?
I'm gonna try to get it from the.
Okay, I'll wait. We got time.
Do we have time?
We do have time. We have nothing but time.
Time is relative. Time is irrelevant.
Time is not. All right. Is anybody besides Isabel have trouble logging in? Okay, wait on you, Isabel. No pressure. All right, y'all, so we can go ahead and look. 23, that's about right. All right, so 87% say that they think watching porn is wrong or sinful. And about 13%, besides the person switching right now, says that they don't think it is. That's totally cool. I think one of the things that our world teaches us, and kind of this over-sexualized, hyper-sexualized culture that we live in, is that it's a normal part of relationship and a normal part of just kind of being. And so for some people to say that they don't think it's wrong or sinful, I get that, for sure. Rachel, you go ahead and go to the next one. Do you think that viewing porn can have harmful effects on you and others? And by harmful effects, I mean, do you think that it can affect you mentally, emotionally, spiritually? Do you think it can affect how you interact with other people? Do you think it affects how you converse with other people? All that stuff. Dang, all right, that's pretty quick. All right, 96%, 91%,
So I want to play.
96%.
How do you do it?
96%, that's what I'm gonna land on. So 96% think that viewing porn can have harmful effects on you, and others 4% don't. That's okay. Like I said, that's kind of what we're fed. You know, that it's normal, that it's part of kind of what we do. Okay, and let's go last one. Do you think that the Bible talks about pornography?
Yes or no?
And I'm not saying, let me clarify. I'm not saying just in general, like do you think the Bible has something specifically to say about pornography?
No.
Mm-hmm. Totally flip.
Are you
Okay.
saying that they consider
Okay.
people porn real? Or
All right.
Okay.
Let me clarify the question just to see if it changes any. Do you think the Bible has something to say about pornography?
Not in a drink.
Not in a direct way.
But yes.
Indirectly. Yes, but indirectly.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. It's about half and half. I'm cool with that. Awesome. Y'all, that's it. Those are the only questions. I just wanted to kind of gauge where we were going to feel in the room. I'm going to share today, out of scripture, out of just some research, scientific research, even about porn. And I hope it would be my hope that by the end of the day you can answer yes to all those questions. But I'm thankful because I feel like this is a place where we can be honest, where we can say, I don't think porn is bad for me, or where I don't know if the Bible talks about porn, or I don't even think it's wrong. I'm thankful that this is a place where we can come and share those opinions, and where we don't judge one another, don't think of one another any less, but where we can just be honest about that. And before we get into it, I think during this talk, it's going to be very easy to get, what's the right word? I guess just down. This can be a very heavy topic, and usually when we talk about it, it can be a very shame-filled topic, a very guilt-drenched topic. And so about 10 or 20 minutes through this thing, you're going to be like, wow, this sucks. And this is really heavy, and this is a lot. And I want to let you guys know that I'm hoping that this is going to be a good talk, that it's a hopeful talk. by the end, there's hope at the end. But in order to get to the end, we kind of need to cover the sin and cover what it does. And so it's going to be heavy. You need to know that up front. But by the end, I think you'll find that it's hopeful. Yes, Yellow?
Sorry. Like, they say that porn is bad, but like, why is there porn? Like, why does it exist if it affects your image? Like,
Great question. And I'll get there, I promise. Is that cool? Cool, I'll answer it, I promise. In this series, Porn, Sex, Dating, last week Robert kicked us off with sex. And he started walking us through kind of Genesis 1 and 2. And he showed us that sex isn't bad, like a lot of the ways we usually talk about it. It's not, don't do this, stay away from this. But it's actually a really good thing that God created for us to enjoy. He created it for Adam and Eve to bond them together, to make two souls into one. It was for them to bond them together because they were two people who were going towards the same goal. They were two people who were in the covenant of marriage together. They were naked and not ashamed. It's the second thing Robert taught us, is that sex was, God made it to be good and made it to benefit us, but it only benefits us in the context in which God intended it. And so, in the context of marriage, it bonds two people together. It bonds souls together. It makes them closer than anything else ever could. And this is something that is not meant to be ripped apart. It's something that's meant to stay together forever, because if you rip that apart, it's like ripping souls from one another. It was never meant to happen. But unfortunately, we moved from Genesis 1 and 2 to Genesis 3. Right? And through the deception of Satan, sin was brought into the world through Adam and Eve. And now, because of that, we desire created things over the one who created us. As humans, our kind of natural bent now is to put other things in the place that God was always supposed to hold. We do this with sex. We do this with relationships. We can do this with food. We can do this with entertainment. We can do this with anything. And that's unfortunately what sin does, is it takes good things that God intended for us to enjoy and to be used in their proper context, and we take it, we run with them, and we put them in a place that God was supposed to hold. We make these things all-consuming things. And when these things that we interact with in our lives become all-consuming, then when they become idols for us, that's when they become sinful. Robert also talked to us about how, because of the fall, because of sin, it's okay. Because of the fall, because of sin, we don't operate within sex how we were meant to. Sex was supposed to be an equal, equivalent giving of yourself to your spouse. But now, because of sin and because of the distortion of God's purposes for sex, now a lot of times we use it to lord over one another. It doesn't become about equals anymore. It becomes about you. It becomes about us, like your own personal desires and pleasure. And so Robert even read us a verse last week that talked about, says that now a man will rule over a woman. And like, that was never how it was meant to be. It was supposed to be the woman came as a helper for the man. They work together. They do things together. But now, a lot of times we see each other as objects. We see each other as something that we rule over, not as a person to be loved that God intended, but as something that we use. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to walk through is, what is sin in general? Because I think if we look at Genesis 3 and we look at sin and sins is a word that we use a lot in the Christian world. It's like, okay, we're not supposed to do it. Sin is pretty much just bad stuff. But we talk about it so much, it kind of loses its like meaning, and power to figure out what it really is. And a lot of times I think we think of sin as just something that God doesn't want us to do. It's like, okay, I'm not crazy concerned about sin, but God must be, so I guess I should be too, so I'll stay away from it. But if we think of sin as only that something only God doesn't want us to do, then when we get to a place where we're like, I actually kind of want to do that, or like, I actually want to engage in that, when our kind of desires rub up against what God wants us to do, if we just think He doesn't want us to do it, odds are we're probably going to go and do it. And so I want to talk about sin in a way that maybe is a little different, but I think will give us a clearer picture of what sin is, because I think that it changes how we fight it and how we go about viewing it once we know what it is. And so sin, when we look at it, isn't bad just because God says so. When we look at God, look at who he is, everything that God is good. God is kind, he's loving, he's gracious, he's merciful, he's just. When we look at the characteristics of God, we see everything good in this world. And sin is the opposite of everything that God is. All of those attributes that make God incredibly good, sin is the opposite of that. If you have a positive, you have a negative, right? So if God is love, then everything unloving is against him. It's sinful. With God as our creator, if he makes us a certain way to do certain things, he alone has the power to say what we should do because he's the one that created us. And we take that, we say, God, I think I know better than you. I don't trust you. That's a sin. We go against things that he explicitly tells us to do. That's a sin. But God doesn't just tell us not to sin because he doesn't want us to. So it's not like a power play of like, well, I'm the creator, you're not, so here, listen to my rules. God hates sin because he sees how much sin hurts us. He doesn't want us to sin, not because he's like withholding something from us, but because he knows the damage that sin causes. And because he loves us so much, when he looks at the things that hurt us and the things that affect us, he hates those things because of how much he loves us. When I talk about the sickness and the death and the pain that sin brings, I'm talking like emotional, mental, spiritual, physical, all kinds of pain. And I wish that I didn't have to make this point that I'm about to make, but I'm going to, because I think in the church a lot of times this is not said, but meant. And I think even in a lot of our minds we can get this point. But sexual sin is a category of sin that I think a lot of people place above other sins. I know when I was growing up, it was kind of like, yeah, here's all these lists. Here's a list of sins in the Bible. Here's all these things you shouldn't do. But like, as long as I didn't have sex before marriage, in my mind, I was good. It's kind of like I could do all these other things, and like these are bad, but like that was really bad. And as long as I don't do that, then I'm kind of good. And don't get me wrong, having sex before marriage is a sin, but so is bitterness. So is anger towards someone. So is gossip. So is lying. And so when it comes to sin, God doesn't see levels of sin. Because God is perfect, one sin is enough to separate us from God. Whether that's a sexual sin, or whether that's bitterness, or whether that's lying, or whether that's any sin. All sin separates us from God. And now on earth, different sins have different repercussions, right? Different sins have different consequences. If you lie to someone, the trust between you two is probably broken. It's going to take some time for you to rebuild that trust. But if you murder someone, you're going to go to prison for a long time. Those are both sins, very different earthly consequences, both still separate you from God. Just so we're clear. But in this series, we're talking a lot about sexual sin. And one thing I don't want you guys to hear from us or from the stage or from whatever is that that's worse than any other sin. Because I think when we think that sexual sin is worse than any other sin, it makes us internalize and it makes us not want to talk about it because we're super ashamed about it. And I want you to know that this is a place where you don't have to be ashamed of that. I mean, if I was struggling with bitterness against somebody, I would bring it to you guys just as easily as if I was struggling with porn. I would want you guys to know because y'all are my community and you guys are community with one another. And so I hope you guys feel that from us, from your leaders, from everybody. This is a place where you can be vulnerable about that you're not going to be judged for that you're not going to be looked down on for that, because we're all sinners and need a Savior, and that bonds us all together. So one of the ways that humans sin, that we twist sin, is by turning sex into something that it was never meant to be. Kind of getting back to the topic of porn. We have made sex from something that bonds a husband and wife together into something that we use just for our own physical pleasure, our own desires, our own wants. And the main way that we do that today, I think, is through porn. Through porn, you can have kind of all the pleasure of that experience without any of the intimacy, without any of the commitment, without any of the relationship. Those three things are why God created sex in the first place. But this is what sin does. And when you sin in general, but when you twist sex in this way, it has a profound impact on us. Just like any other sin, it hurts us. And so, I think you kind of alluded to this, but one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this today, I know when I first said we're going to do a porn, sex, and dating series, a lot of y'all were like, oh, yikes, like, that's a lot. And I know it's a lot. But as I was thinking about the series and why I wanted to talk about it, I think porn is just such a prevalent thing in our culture, in our world, that I don't think there's any way we couldn't talk about it. I know this from my experience with student ministries. I've worked in student ministry since I was 18, so for 7 years. And in every student ministry that I've worked in, I've one-on-one mentored and discipled students that are struggling with pornography, with a porn addiction. I know that it's not really a difference between boys and girls. Both struggle. And as I know that from my own experience, because I was researching for this, sermon, and I ran across a lot of statistics that proved that for me. And so I don't know if these are going to be helpful to you guys. If you are a person who tunes out, it's statistics, then that's okay. But I think these are important and shed some light on it. So a study of college students found that 93% of boys and 62% of girls had seen pornography during their teen years. So that's like all dudes in this room except one, and like all the girls except like you five. A national survey found that 64% of young people from 13 to 24 actively seek out porn weekly or more often. And this one was kind of hit the nail on the head for me. With the average age that a child sees porn is 11. And I've seen statistics and numbers as low as 8. So crazy. But with the accessibility of technology now, porn's 2 clicks away, like at any second. And so now kids are finding it, and it's terrible. But other than it being a huge impact for us, why are we talking about it? And one of the big reasons, I think, is because God takes sin seriously. And when we look at our lives in this room, I think it'd be safe to say that pornography is a sin that we struggle with. And so God takes sin seriously, and so how can we take it? I think we should take it seriously too. So to that question, does the Bible talk about pornography? There's a lot of different places in Scripture where the Bible lists sins, right? There are a bunch of examples, and I pulled a few. 2 Corinthians 12:21 says, I fear that when I come again, my God may humble me before you, and I may have to mourn over many of those who sinned earlier, and having not repented of the impurity, sexual immorality, and sensuality that they practiced. Another one says, now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalry, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. I warn you, as I warned before, yes, the Bible says orgies. I warn you, as I warned before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. Ephesians 5:3, but sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be names among you, as is proper among saints. And then Colossians 3:5, put to death therefore what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. One of the things I wanted to point out about those is that it lists all those sins together. It doesn't say, put to death what is earthly, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, but especially sexual sins. Especially that, or sexual immorality. It's all in the same list. It's all the same. It's all sin. But if you notice, sexual immorality appeared in every one of those lists. And what I find really interesting, sexual immorality, if you need a definition, is anything sexual outside of the context of marriage. Doesn't matter who it's with, doesn't matter if it's before marriage, after marriage, doesn't matter if you're by yourself, with somebody else, whatever. It's all sexual immorality. But I think porn fits into that category. Because in the Greek, when you're looking at all of these verses, when it says sexual immorality, the word there, the Greek word that is used is actually porneia. It's the root of that word is where we get our word pornography. It's sexual immorality. Even later, Jesus even speaks about it in Matthew when he's in the Sermon on the Mount. He says, you've heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery, sexual immorality. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. It's impossible to watch porn without lusting. That's the reason you go watch it in the first place. Right? Jesus talks about it. He mentions it. Do you guys ever have a joke that you want to say, but you're like, I don't know if I should say this or not? Right? So Jesus later, after that passage, he goes on and he says, if your eye causes you to sin, and pluck it out. Or if your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. And Jesus really takes sin seriously, but I think there's a reason that Jesus used hands and eyes as his example in this passage of things that cause us sin. So do with that what you will. Know that. But there you go. Thanks, Luke. But it's for us this morning. Sex and porn are huge in our culture. We live in an over-sexualized, hyper-sexualized world. And whether it's looking at porn on the internet or whether it's sending nudes to your boyfriend or girlfriend, whether you struggle with porn or whether someone you know struggles with porn, it's everywhere and it affects all of us. And one of the reasons that we know that porn is sinful is because of the damage that it causes and because of the hurt and the pain that it leads us to, just like all other sins. One of the things that I think is really cool about our faith and about science is actually that scientific research is continually backing up what the Bible has said for thousands of years. And when it comes to porn and porn addiction, that's very true. There's a group that I've been following and supporting since I was in college called Fight the New Drug. And they're an anti-pornography organization. And their whole thing that they do is they gather statistics and research and scientific data about porn and the impacts that it has on us. And there's tons of research and studies now that have been coming out that show how porn is affecting us as humans. And one of the big ways that it's affecting us is it's affecting our brains. There's studies that are coming out, not Christian studies, just scientific studies that are coming out that show that the way that pornography affects people is very similar to the way that a hard drug addicts someone. It triggers the dopamine centers in your brain when you take it or use it, and then when you're off of it, you need more again to fill those same centers. So you keep going back and you keep going back. And the longer you engage in it, the more it has a hold on you. And that's why porn addiction, like medically speaking, psychologically speaking, is a very real thing. And some of you in this room may have felt that, may have gone, I know that it's wrong, and I kind of feel like it's wrong, and I want to stop, but for some reason I can't. And that's why. The way this addiction works, it rewires how your brain handles those things and those chemicals. That's how it works. It changes your views on sex and your views on sexuality when you engage in it like that. And again, let me say, desiring sex in its proper context is not bad at all. But when you engage in pornography, you're continually reinforcing to your brain that that image on a screen is real, is a real person, and your brain doesn't know the difference. And after a period of time of doing this, it has effects on you. There are tons of studies out there and research that are saying that now people are actually preferring porn to real relationships and to real sex. John Mayer, last year he was in an interview and he said that he actually doesn't have a ton of interest in dating anymore because watching porn is way easier. He was like, I'm just not. And John Mayer, typically, he was a dude that dated around a lot, in Hollywood. But now he's like, I don't want to do that anymore because, porn's kind of working. Which is really sad. Like, it's taken him out of the real world of interacting with other people because he's like, this is just easy. The number of people that are having sex before marriage has even gone down because now people just, they're satisfied there. They're watching porn and they're like, I don't need, to go out and bond with someone. It's just, I'm good. And this is totally against what God designed sex for. Sex is meant to make two people one. It was never meant to be separated from that, and that's why it's supposed to be reserved for marriage, because that's what it's for, to bond two people into one who are never supposed to be separated. But this is also why bonding yourself to someone on a screen, into an image on a screen, is so harmful. Because again, your brain doesn't know the difference, your heart doesn't know the difference. Watching porn has also been linked to depression, anxiety, stress, and social problems. I didn't know if I was going to say this or not, but I know how big of an issue depression is as well, and anxiety. And I want to read this just because I read it for myself, and I was like, oh gosh, that makes so much sense. But I don't know if we've ever put words to it. So I'm going to read this for you guys. It says, although porn consumption promises to help individuals relax and relieve their stress, a growing number of studies have found that porn consumption is actually linked to poor mental health outcomes. This link is particularly strong when porn consumers engage in a pattern of self-concealment, which is when they do things they're not proud of, and then they keep them a secret from their friends and their family. This pattern not only hurts their relationships and leaves them feeling lonely, but it also makes them more vulnerable to emotional and psychological problems. For both male and female porn users, their habit is often accompanied by problems with anxiety, body image issues, poor self-image, relationship problems, insecurity, and depression. I mean, y'all, the consequences of sin are real, and the realities of these things are real. The Bible makes it clear that when we go against what God has for us, it hurts us. And this isn't because God doesn't love us or because he's like, you're sinning, now I'm going to punish you with all these things, but he's not. This is just the reality of what sin does. It destroys, and it hurts us. Another way that porn affects us is it affects our hearts. It affects how we see the people that God calls us to love. One of the things that is huge in the research community now is that when you engage in pornography, you begin to see people as objects and not people. You stop being able to think relationally, and you, as you're walking down, through school or down the street or whatever, you just can't help but undress people with your eyes, because you begin to see people as how can I use them. There's a study that came out that it was by Yale, and it came out and they took two groups of people, and this one group of people did not watch porn. This other group of people, I'm not gesturing to you, this one group of people did not watch porn, and this other group said they engaged in porn once a week or more. And what they did is they showed these two groups of people two different sets of pictures. One group of pictures was like faces, like people. And when they showed them those pictures, they were doing brain scans. When they showed them those pictures, the center of their brain lit up that recognizes people. It's the part of your brain that lights up when you engage in a conversation, the relational side. And then they showed them pictures of tools, like a drill or a hammer or a saw or whatever. And this other part of the brain lit up back here. And it was the part that sees almost like a problem solving part, like how can I use this object to do this thing? It's a more spatially aware part of our brain, so that. They took those same pictures and they showed them to this group. And only one area of the brain lit up, and it was this one. When they saw faces, when they saw people, and then when they saw a hammer, or saw a saw. This is part of the brain that saw people as an object. This is a clear warping of what God wants for us when it comes to sex. When it comes to sex, God thinks sex is good. God is for you having sex, but he wants you to do it in the proper context. And when we take sex and we use it this way, it distorts our minds and our hearts and what God wants for us in that. God's design for sex is so much greater than that and than what we've made it. And God's desire for us is also to love one another well. And when you view pornography, you're taking advantage of that person on the screen. You're not loving them as God has called you to love people. And you also give yourself false expectations. Give yourself a false idea of what that might be like. And you even hurt your future spouse because you bond yourself to pictures on the screen that aren't them. sin hurts us, and because porn is sinful, porn hurts us. To this point, we've kind of talked about it in a very like up here way. It's like, it's not grounded in reality almost. It's kind of like porn is this thing that we're talking about, but I want this to be something that as a student ministry, you feel the freedom to talk about. That we can share our stories here and not experience shame or guilt, but freedom that comes with sharing. It comes from knowing one another well. And so in the spirit of that, I actually asked Dani to come up here and share her testimony. She offered a couple of weeks ago, and she is one of the 11th girl leaders, and she's really awesome if you haven't gotten to meet her. But she's also Robert's wife. Robert spoke last week, and so she was here and has been in it with us. So I want to invite her up to share her testimony. If y'all would, welcome her up to ground.
So, obviously my name is Dani. Can you guys hear me okay? I don't have a microphone. Just want to make sure. Okay, cool. So I just want to share with you guys and just be real that I did have a struggle with porn, and the Lord rescued me from that. And so I want to just let you guys know what that looked like in my life. So it started when I was 12. So those statistics that you gave are real. Also, the internet was a very different thing than what you guys have today. I did not have a smartphone. Those did not exist. You had to pay for like anything on the internet. Also, when you use the internet, you tie up all of the phone lines, so no one can like make or receive phone calls. And so most of my time on the internet was after everyone like had gone to bed or they didn't need to use the phone anymore. And so it just started with very innocent. I would look up like funny jokes online, right? Like that's no harm in that, right? And then it kind of turned into dirty jokes online and like dirty stories and things like that. And so kind of had to use my imagination for a little bit there, but as the years went through, that desire kind of grew bigger in me. And so the dirty jokes and dirty stories just like weren't cutting it. I wanted more. And the statistics also kind of verify that when you have a struggle with porn, you kind of go further and further with it. Like it's like, oh, well, it's just this one little thing, and then you want something more than that, and more than that, and then it's something that's very destructive. And so as this kind of grew, I just kind of would justify it to myself. I'm like, oh, if this isn't really wrong, like the Bible doesn't talk about this. If there's no scripture that says thou shalt not look at pornography, right? Like that's easy. It was just kind of something that I would just tell myself, make myself feel better, right? And every time I'd feel guilty. After every single time, I was like, man, why did I do that? Like I don't want to do this anymore. But then every time, just keep going. Happened over and over again. And I never really admitted that it was a problem, never really talked about it. It was just kind of this thing that I did that was in the dark. Nobody knew about it. So I went to college. So it's been like 5 or 6 years at this point. Still haven't talked to anybody about it. Ended up in multiple sexually abusive relationships. And so I would use porn as an escape from that reality. And so it wasn't until after college, the guy that I had been with for about 5 years dumped me, and my whole world was just completely shattered, right? I had built kind of this whole idol on this sex and relationship with him. And when that went away, I was like, well, what do I do now? I don't have anything left. And the Lord really used that as just as a transformational time in my life. He opened my eyes to see that was where I was putting all of my identity and all of my hopes was in that relationship. Like, oh, it's okay that he rapes me. It's okay that that I use porn as my pleasure, right? That this is such a terrible relationship. This is fine. And so I realized that I had completely abandoned God. I totally left him on the sidelines, did my own thing. I pursued what felt right to me and didn't really care what God had to say about it. So I didn't really know what to do with that. When the Lord kind of showed me that, I was like, okay, I have a problem. How do I fix it? No idea. I had moved, so I went to college in California, and I moved to Tyler, Texas. Did not know anyone. I'm like, cool, this is great. I have this problem, like my boyfriend just dumped me. This is perfect. This is definitely what I wanted. And so I just kind of started going to a church, found a church nearby, and was like, maybe I'll meet some friends. I don't know. And so I started going there, and just opened my Bible more, and just was like, all right, clearly this was where the issue was, and started pursuing that. And still did not tell anyone about my struggle. It was just like, we're just gonna brush this under the rug, it's fine, I'm just gonna keep going to church, go through the motions. And I had a friend on Facebook share about Fight the New Drug. It was when it like first came out. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And obviously relating to it, where I'm like, oh, it's talking about porn. And it's not a religious organization, it's just numbers. And I was actually in grad school for neuroscience, so anyone that knows me, like numbers are my favorite thing. I like love statistics, research, it's like my love language. And so when I went to this website and I saw like all the statistics and saw that it actually affects your brain, that intrigued me, right? I'm like, oh man, okay, this thing that I've been avoiding has other consequences that I didn't realize, right? So, since it wasn't religious, it didn't say like, hey, just so you know, porn's a sin, right? But I grew up in the church and I knew enough about God to know that if this is rewiring my brain and kind of harming my relationships and changing basically who I am, then that surely must be a sin, because that is not how God designed it. That is not what God wants for me. I knew that God wanted my best. He has my best interests at heart. And so I was like, okay, this is probably not something I should keep pursuing. So I still kind of kept it in the dark. Didn't want to tell anyone. Now that I've decided this is a problem, I was like, okay, well, I've been struggling with it for like 10 years. Who's gonna, like, why would I bring this up now? Can't tell anyone and be like, why did you wait 10 years to tell people that you had this problem, right? Like, what are they gonna think of me? And like, part of me also knew that, okay, it must be wrong if I'm afraid to admit it, right? If I'm afraid to tell someone about it, that like conviction, right? But I should have brought it to the Lord, but instead, or brought it to others, but instead I just kind of kept it between God and I. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do this on my own. And so every time that I felt that desire, I was like, I'm just gonna pray. I'm just gonna pray that it would go away. And that was what kind of got me through it to a point. And there were definitely times where I would mess up and I'd be like, it's fine, this is fine. And then I would do it again. I'm like, man, why? Why can I not escape this, right? And so it was definitely a lot less, but I could not do it on my own. Ended up moving to Dallas and joined a new church. And there was this new community group that I joined, and we had to go through and like tell our stories and our testimonies and stuff. And there was just this strong conviction, like, hey, you need to share that thing that you're hiding from everyone. You need to talk about it. The church had a value of authenticity, and I know fellowship does as well. And so I just felt like if I didn't share that was a struggle for me, that it was going to hold me back from really growing with these people. And so I kept it inside of me a little bit longer, but knowing that the enemy had this card that he could play at any moment, like, oh, who would know? It's okay if you look at it, it's fine. No one's gonna hold you accountable to that, it's okay. And so that kind of enraged me, and so I was like, no, I need to get this out. Like, he can't have this hold over my life, right? Just from this one sin. And so, so I shared about it. I was the last one to go. Like every week we would go through like someone else's story, and I'm like, no, I'm not gonna go this week, I'm good. And then finally I was like, no, okay, I'm ready to talk about it. And I shared about it, and I was so scared. I was like, man, these people are gonna be like, yeah, can I get a new group? This girl's weird. Like, she got some issues here. And but that wasn't their response. They responded with love and comfort, and they were like, hey, thank you for sharing. Thank you for being vulnerable. And then some of them also shared that they struggle with that as well. And so I felt like I wasn't alone, that there were other people, like, girls don't struggle with this, right? Like, why would I want to talk about it? They're gonna be like, oh, are you a guy? Like, girls don't have this problem. Like, and so I just felt so much relief and freedom from just admitting that, like, hey, this is an issue that I have. And knowing that they have had that, they've experienced that, and they still cared about me and still wanted to do life with me, that was super encouraging to me. So basically that was the beginning of a new life, so to speak, right? So I don't struggle with it any longer. It's been about 5 years since that happened, but that struggle has played a really big role in my life now. So I'm involved now with a ministry called Reclaimed, and it's a sex trafficking ministry. And for those of you who don't know what sex trafficking is, it's basically humans being sold as slaves for sex. It's usually minors. It kind of leads into prostitution, very connected. So that is something that can actually start in a lot of ways from porn. It could be you send a nude photo to your boyfriend or girlfriend, right? And then they have this hold on you. Well, if you don't sleep with me, I'm gonna share this photo. Or, oh, if you loved me, you would sleep with me. If you really love me, you'd sleep with my friend, because he's gonna pay me money to sleep with you. And so it distorts it and it changes it. So it could also be a girl that got in a fight with her parents, decides to run away, doesn't have any food, doesn't have shelter, doesn't have money. She's at the bus stop, dark station. Just conveniently, this older man shows up. Oh, you need a place to stay? That's fine, I got you. Yeah, I'll get you a place to stay. You'll be okay, get everything you need. And now she's essentially tied to that and forces her to do things that maybe she doesn't want to do. And what if she doesn't want to do them? What happens then? Well, drugs her, finds some other way to forcefully make that happen. Maybe films it, and then what happens to that video? Uploads it to Pornhub or YouTube, something where we view it, right? When you're addicted to porn or searching for it, you're like, oh, great, yeah, this looks good. I'm gonna watch this video. Don't realize you're watching an actual kid get raped. And so knowing that and like just the education of that has really kind of changed my life too. And just being able to go out and educate others about it. So what I do is once a month we go out to local motels and businesses and tell them like, hey, these are some of the signs. If you see a girl with an older guy, or even guys with a guy or a girl, like it can happen to boys too. This is not just like a girl problem. But this is something that is very prevalent. There's a lot of like politicians now that are putting this in their platforms. This is a really big deal. It's not just like a, hey, we're just gonna talk about it here and there, and then we're gonna slide it under the rug because it's uncomfortable and nobody wants to talk about it. So this is something I'm really passionate about, just because I see that porn essentially is feeding this industry. By watching porn, you're encouraging these guys to go out and make these videos and find these girls and boys and torture them and put them through emotional trauma, physical trauma, just so many things. And so seeing how those are directly related and just quality of life and just wanting the best for other people, that kind of motivates me to fight for this and to share with you guys kind of what the Lord has brought me through and bring light to this issue, because it's something that you see it on billboards, you see it in movies, you see it in TV shows. There's no way to get around it. We have hypersexualized our culture. And so as Christians, we're called to just walk in a manner that is worthy of the Lord and that glorifies Him. And He would not want His people to be treated this way. He doesn't want anyone to be treated any of these ways. And so next time that you think that looking at porn is only affecting you and doesn't affect anyone else, not a big deal. It's only, once a month, once a year, whatever, no matter how many times, it has a much bigger effect than you think on your brain, your relationships, present and future, and it's really what drives like prostitution and trafficking. So if porn is something that you do struggle with, I would really encourage you guys to share it with a friend, with your parents, with us. We care about you. What you share with us is confidential. We just want to help you and love you. So just so you know, you're not too far gone. I struggled with it for 10 years. And so I just want you all to know that there's nothing that separates you so far from God that He cannot rescue you. He loves you, and so He wants to rescue you the same way He rescued me.
Thanks, Dani. Y'all, I'm making y'all small groups soon, because I know y'all want to talk. As I was trying to figure out how to close this time, this verse came to my mind. It says, He made the one who did not know sin to be sin for us, so that in Him we might become the righteousness of God. I told you this was going to be heavy. This talk is going to be hard. But I could really care less about your behavior. I love you guys. I'm not here to try to make you better people. And I'm not here to tell you just to not do stuff. Like Dani shared, I've seen how this affects us. I've seen it with students that I've worked with my friends. I've seen how porn has affected them, how it's hurt them. And I've seen how it's hurt me. I struggled with a porn addiction from when I was 11 to when I was 19. And all of these things that I've shared, I've experienced. I know Danny's experienced, and every kid I've talked to has experienced. And so we hit these things hard, and we share these things with you guys because I don't want you guys to go through the hurt and the pain and the struggle that does genuinely come from this. But the good news here is that even if you're addicted to porn, there's hope. If you feel like you're too far gone, or you feel like you're too affected, you're not. The gospel is hope for us. He made the one who did not know sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. When you come and trust in Jesus and put your faith in him, God takes all of your sin and he puts it on Jesus on the cross. You are clean. You are loved. It's over. You don't have to, from that moment, never sin again, because Jesus died for your past, present, and future sins. God knows every sin that you're going to commit. He loves you. And he wants you. And that all that brokenness that you may feel, all the anxiety and the depression and worry about, have I gone too far? Am I too messed up? Am I too broken? You're not. And the same thing that freed Danny from that addiction freed me from that addiction. Is when I went to college, I got with a community of guys from my college. And we realized we all struggled with the same thing. And we got around one another and we confessed to one another every time we struggled. We put blockers on one another's phones. We made it happen. And that's where I learned kind of what true community was, what brotherhood is. Helping one another come around this struggle and fight this battle together. So if I can encourage you guys with anything, one, it would be to believe the gospel and know that Jesus loves you beyond a shadow of a doubt, no matter how addicted you are, how much struggle you're under, how much sin you struggle with. God loves you. And it's okay to struggle. And second is to be vulnerable with your community. Be authentic with your community, because God doesn't like for us and doesn't want and never meant for us to struggle alone. He wants us to come together and to learn about him and to be forgiven together. So that's what I encourage you guys with. If you need to talk to someone, please come talk to Danny. Come talk to me. You can talk to your leader. If you feel like you need to do it one-on-one, if you feel safer that way, I get that. That's okay. But don't leave here in the midst of this struggle without sharing it, because I know what you're feeling. And I know how hard it is. And I don't want that for you guys anymore. So, I'm going to pray for us. Let's go to small groups. Father, Lord, thank you. We need you in this, in all sins, in all struggles, God. But today, we need you in this. Be with us, be with our conversations. Thank you for your son. Amen. All right, guys. Love y'all. Head to small groups.